Hey everyone,
I'm Tim, and I've just finished a 9-month odyssey around Latin America. Now I'm reopening my diaries, and this time I'm bringing you along with me. Week by week, country by country, all the colors, all the craziness, all the food, all the music, and all the splendor. 9 months when each morning was a new adventure. The road was my companion, and Latin America cast its spell on me. This is my Latin America Diaries. Welcome back to Latin America Diaries. After flying in from the Galapagos Islands, I flew in via Guayaquil to Quito's distant international airport and into the capital of Ecuador. From there, I checked into the Secret Garden Hostel, which is something of an institution among backpackers in South America, before immediately heading out for dinner. I headed to a little pizzeria down the road and I was in for a treat because the pizzeria owner, Tony, is a real character. I walked in and he somehow managed to create a table for me out of what looked like just a random collection of furniture that he had sitting there. And then he sat me opposite another backpacker who was finishing her meal. But we barely even got a chance to talk because the owner completely dominated the room and in the best possible way. He was tossing pizzas high into the air behind the counter and somehow always catching them. At one point, he even challenged one of the customers to do chin-ups on a bar over the front door, promising them a free glass of wine if they could manage 15 of them without letting go. Let's just say that I was never really in the running for a free glass of wine myself. After that, I headed back to the hostel and called it a night. Quito is a high-altitude Andean city, and although it's not as high as some of the places that I had already visited in the Andes, this would actually be one of the last major Andean cities that I would see in South America. That morning, I headed out into the city center to explore it. I followed a self-guided walking tour around the historic center of Quito, including Independence Square, and wandered through the beautiful old colonial streets filled with cathedrals, plazas, balconies, and these gorgeous sightlines through arches and alleyways towards the surrounding mountains. Towering above the city is the Virgin of El Panecillo, the enormous winged Virgin Mary statue that watches over Quito from one of the hills surrounding the old town. Quito had a really lovely atmosphere. It was elegant, traditional, historic and distinctly Andean all at once. It reminded me a bit of Pasto in the south of Colombia, and that's actually not that far as the crow flies. But while I was walking around the downtown of Quito, I could sense that something was going on in my stomach. I had finished the course of antibiotics that I had picked up in Cuenca the week before when I got food poisoning there, and I had a feeling that whatever issue was there to begin with was beginning to circle back around and come back with a vengeance. So although I did have a good time just sort of wandering the streets of downtown Quito, it became less about sightseeing in the end and more about trying to locate the nearest bathroom wherever I could. But I was not completely sick at this point. It was more of a major inconvenience rather than actually ruining the trip. And I still managed to get to see a bit of downtown Quito. I got this incredible view from the center of the city of the Basilica del Voto Nacional, the enormous neo-Gothic church that rises above Quito from one of the surrounding hills. It looks almost surreal against the mountains and feels like something that you'd expect to find in Europe rather than high in the Andes of Ecuador. I wasn't going to let my stomach hold me down though, because I had planned to, that afternoon, go on a tour out to one of Quito's premier tourist attractions, which is way out on the northern periphery of the city. Ecuador's capital sits slightly south of the equator, and the actual equator line itself runs through a park just to the north of the city. This area is known as Mitad del Mundo, the middle of the world. Now, there are several ways that you can get out to Mitad del Mundo. One of them is that you can organize transport by yourself. You can get a taxi to take you out there. It's basically in the northern suburbs of the city. Or you can take a tour, which is often organized through the hotels and hostels in Quito. And although I'm not really much of a tour person, this is one where it really paid off, and you'll see why in a minute. Because when you get there, you realize that there's actually much more to do and see there than just standing on that yellow painted line down the middle of the street. First, there's the giant Mitad del Mundo monument, the famous monument marking the equator that most people recognize from photos if they search for the area online. But interestingly, modern GPS measurements later revealed that the monument itself isn't actually built on the precise equatorial line. The true equator actually lies about 200 meters north of this monument, and that's where there is a small theme park, although theme park, it's probably more park than theme. It's a group of attraction and cultural sites that have been clustered around the actual GPS-defined line that runs through this area. And this is the more interesting part anyway. It's part natural museum, part cultural center, part science demonstration, and part tourist attraction. And this is where having a guide really helps, because there are all sorts of strange explanations and experiments that they walk you through while they're explaining the unique geography of the equator itself. So when we first arrived there, we were given a short tour of a traditional Ecuadorian village, or rather a mock traditional Ecuadorian village, and we were allowed to taste cacao. Cacao, of course, is the plant that grows the beans that are eventually turned into chocolate and cocoa, and this is something that Ecuador is world famous for. Ecuador does many things well, including chocolate and coffee. After all, it does border Peru to the south and Colombia to the north. But if I had to pick one thing that is sort of really iconic from Ecuador, I'd say it's the cacao and resulting chocolate from that. With my stomach still not 100%, I tasted only a very small amount of the cacao pod, but it was still a really interesting experience. After that, we were shown a small pen with guinea pigs in it. Now, if you're not familiar, guinea pigs are actually a very big deal in this part of the world, including southern Colombia as well. Like I said, parts of Ecuador reminded me of these regions. And guinea pigs are important in traditional Andean culture. They're often associated with ceremonies and traditional life, but they're also eaten as well. So yes, those cute guinea pigs that you may have grown up with or had neighbors that grew up with them when you were younger, they're considered part of the cuisine in this part of the world. After that, there was a small flora and fauna exhibition, but then it was time to get to the equator itself. The guide pulled out a coordinates app on his phone, and he showed us that we were standing directly on the equator, the exact middle of the world. And this was where he began demonstrating some of the strange phenomena associated with the equator. First, he showed us a sundial, which becomes effectively useless twice a year because at the equinoxes, the sun appears directly overhead. He also spoke to us about another type of sundial that was historically used by indigenous civilizations in this region, including the Inca. Then came the classic equator demonstrations. We watched water drain clockwise and counterclockwise, depending on which side of the equator it was poured from. Although I should say that later I read that this is probably more of a sleight of hand by the guide than actual physics at this scale. Still, it was entertaining. After that, we were walked down the exact equator line itself, where you can attempt to walk heel to toe in a perfectly straight line. Apparently, because you're standing at the widest rotational point of the Earth, balancing becomes noticeably more difficult. I promise that none of us had been drinking before attempting this. Similarly, trying to balance an egg upright on the head of a nail at the equator is supposedly more difficult there than in anywhere else in the world. And finally, there was another demonstration where you hold your arms out horizontally while someone pushes them down. According to the guide, your balance and resistance are affected differently right on the equator because of the Earth's rotational forces. I don't know how much of all of this was actually scientifically proven, how much of it is pseudoscience, how much of it is sort of smoke and mirrors, but I can say that it was marvelous to be there on the equator line. I mean, what a moment, and it really feels special to be there. I would, like I said, I can't reiterate this enough, it was great to be there with a guide, at least to be there within the center with a guide so that we could see these experiments being performed directly in front of us. While I was there, I still wasn't feeling 100%, and I felt that my stomach was really starting to ramp up again. There were some other people in our group that were really friendly, but to be honest, I was struggling. And you know, I try to be nice and smile at people and make conversation, but really at this point, I probably came across as a bit of an asshole because I really just felt like I didn't need to pretend because I was not feeling okay. The next morning I woke up again for my last full day in Quito. That's right, I only spent 2 complete days there. I knew that I hadn't really appreciated Quito for everything that it had to offer, but at the same time I knew that I was there at the end of my time in South America, and there were definitely 2 things that I wanted to do before leaving. The first was to celebrate the Ecuadorian edition of my 40th birthday, and for that I headed directly downtown to the República del Cacao. Because really, what better way is there to celebrate a birthday in Ecuador than with an Ecuadorian chocolate and dulce de leche cake? Equal parts Ecuadorian and generally South American. It was decadent, it was rich, it was delicious, and it was entirely mine. And then about 10 minutes later, it sent me sprinting to the toilet. Still, honestly, I think it was worth it. I mean, you only live once, right? And then after that, the other thing that I wanted to do was try on a Panama hat. Now, fun fact, Panama hats are in fact not from Panama. They are from Ecuador. And there are many places around the city of Quito where you can see where they're made and even try them on. If you're enjoying these random facts about South America that maybe you didn't know before, please consider giving this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and share it across your social media. And if you're really enjoying what you're seeing, please tell your family and friends about it, because it really helps me grow my YouTube channel and it really means a lot to me too. After the cake, I made the executive decision not to eat anything else for the rest of the day, at least until I got to my next destination, because I was about to board a long-distance bus out of the city of Quito. I went back to the hostel to pick up my luggage and then jumped on Quito's metro bus system, which would take me out to the Terminal La Ofelia, not the Fate of Ophelia, from where I would take my bus onwards to the mountain city of Mindo. And it was there, sitting at Terminal La Ofelia, waiting for my bus, with my health beginning to feel like it was starting to deteriorate once again, that I noticed a strange transaction on my bank account. At first I thought that maybe it was something that I had forgotten about, because I'd been traveling a lot and probably making unusual transactions in the week or two prior to that point, because I'd been in hospital in Cuenca, I'd been to pharmacies, I'd been out to the Galapagos Islands, I'd been using my card at the ATMs on the Galapagos Islands, and it didn't work there. So I sort of thought, okay, well, maybe it's something that I hadn't really accounted for. But then just as the bus pulled in, I realized that another transaction had been made in the few minutes prior, and this time it was at a jewelry market in Brazil, and immediately I knew that something was wrong. I had to get on the bus, so I stuffed my phone in my pocket, I checked my luggage in, I got onto the bus, and by the time I sat down in the seat, I opened the banking app one more time and noticed that another 2 transactions had gone through at the same jewelry market in Brazil, and that the total transactions had added up to about 160 Australian dollars. And that was the moment that I realized that my credit card had been skimmed somewhere. I don't know where it was. Like, I don't want to believe that it was at the hotel by the lake in Copacabana in Bolivia, where I withdrew all that money on a credit card or debit card machine in a restaurant. I don't think that was it. I went shopping when I was in Arequipa in Peru. I also tried to use my card at several ATMs in both Cuenca and in the Galapagos Islands, and I wasn't able to do the transaction several times, so that was a bit of a red flag. I don't even know if it might have been skimmed when I was in Brazil all those months earlier, and then whoever did it may have sat on the details, hoping that I wouldn't notice all these months later. I even thought about the fact that I had to enter my debit card details into the Western Union app in order to wire money to myself. I mean, it really could have been anything. But whatever it was, I knew that I had to do something about it. So thankfully, if you're in Australia, I can recommend the ANZ banking app, because they make it very easy to block your card immediately, which I did. And in fact, they replaced the card digitally on your phone within minutes. So that was fantastic. I was sitting on the bus as we made our way out of Quito, out of cell phone reception area, and on our way towards Mindo, which sits a bit further down the mountains in the Andes, and we entered a new type of environment for me, the cloud forest. Have you ever been to a cloud forest before? If so, please mention it in the comments below. For me, this was something completely new, and it was something that I would encounter more in Central America, which is in the upcoming vlogs. But at that point it was super exciting. As the bus wound its way down into the Mindo Valley, the clouds certainly began creeping in. We drove through patches of rain, but I mean, that's to be expected when you're literally traveling through the clouds. Eventually I arrived at the Temple 3 hostel, which was this beautiful sort of faux Balinese Byron Bay style place tucked away in Mindo. And that's kind of what Mindo is. It's sort of like a bit of a slightly warmer natural getaway from Quito, but it's also a slightly cooler hill station, if you like, for the people in the lowlands of Ecuador, where the temperature's generally much higher. It has this very relaxed backpacker meets wellness retreat atmosphere to it. That night, however, I knew that I was in trouble food-wise. I found a local supermarket where I bought some Greek yogurt and plain bread, and then made myself the blandest meal known to man, just to try and stabilize my stomach a bit. I also went to a pharmacy where they gave me these expensive probiotic capsules to try and replenish whatever had been going on in my digestive system at that point. But I still felt like I wasn't doing okay. I knew that I only had 2 more days left in Ecuador and therefore in South America at that point, and I sort of went into survival mode. I was like, if I can just enjoy this experience for what it is, try and see my health as a minor inconvenience, and then deal with this when I get to a place where I'm not traveling so quickly and it's hopefully a warmer climate that I might be able to recuperate a bit more again. On top of that, I also had the problem with my credit card, but that at that point wasn't such an issue because I had already kind of found a workaround with that with Western Union when I was in the Galapagos Islands, because in that moment I was presented with a non-functioning debit card as well. So I kind of already had the workaround, and like I said, the app did the rest in replacing my card digitally. With all of that out of the way, it was time to go out and appreciate Mindo for what it is. So I headed out immediately to the Mindo Chocolate Museum. And yes, I knew that this was going to be kryptonite for my stomach, but at the same time, I may only be in Ecuador once in my life, and I mean, you know what they say, a moment on the lips, a lifetime on the hips, except this wouldn't stay on my hips. It would actually provide me with a reason to exercise when I had to run for the bathroom. So I went ahead with it. At the museum, we were shown the whole chocolate making process, beginning with the cacao plant itself. They explained how cacao pods are harvested, how the beans are removed and fermented.
It tastes like lychee.
Yeah, a bit closer.
Or mango.
And mango. Mango seed. Also, it tastes similar.
Actually, yeah, it's like the center of the mango.
Yeah,
Actually, yeah, exactly.
Then dried and roasted before being crushed down into cacao nibs.
Yeah, I'm getting coffee from that.
There you
yeah,
go.
Yeah.
So yes, maybe this one is one of.
So, which part am I eating exactly? Is it just any part except the shell?
Yes.
So, like those bits there.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not going to. There you go. So this is our roasting machine.
And it's 180 degrees.
120.
120 degrees.
And more heavy, so they stay on the floor. And with this thing, we can do your chocolate.
And then eventually processed into chocolate. From there, the cacao is blended and emulsified with sugar and other ingredients to create different types of chocolate with different cocoa percentages. And one interesting thing that I learned there was that cacao trees can actually pick up subtle flavor notes from neighboring plants. So if cacao is grown near coffee plants, for example, the chocolate may develop slight coffee undertones. If it's grown near mango trees, you might get subtle fruity notes. It's honestly a whole world of tasting and flavor profiling, much like wine or coffee. We sampled all sorts of chocolates, 85%, 70%, 60%, mint chocolate, ginger chocolate, mango chocolate, and a whole range of other flavors that the place specialized in. Then, because cacao can apparently also be beneficial to your skin, it was time for a cacao face mask.
There you go. So that's 100.
It's
Strong.
smooth.
And I will give you some tea.
Alright, so cacao tea. And this is made from the shell.
From shells, exactly. It smells like chocolate, but it don't taste too strong like chocolate.
Yeah, it does smell like chocolate. Actually, you know what? It's got a really nice flavor. It's like chocolate, but it's really like I can taste a bit of chocolate in there, but it's really like
It has a different
subtle.
taste, like
Yeah.
black tea maybe. Think so.
It's sort of like chocolate tea.
There you
I
go.
mean, it is chocolate tea, but it's like that's exactly
There you
what
go.
it tastes like.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it's like-
15% sugar.
So this, yes,
Okay.
this is my favorite percentage these days. I can eat it all day and I'll stop.
Oh really?
Yeah, maybe I get sick in a week, but there
You only
go.
live once.
There you go. So that's 85. Really nice chocolate.
It is really good, actually.
It smells really good. Also, and now it has a little bit of sugar, so it's more eatable.
And you know, it doesn't like I'm thinking about if I eat chocolate in Australia or wherever, for example, normally I would enjoy a 70%. But this, I think, because of the quality of it, I could enjoy the 85.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of people told me that normally they only can eat like 70, and it's the one that they like it. But they taste the 85 here is like sweet.
It is,
sweeter,
yeah, yeah.
and it's
And finally, I wrapped up the entire thing with a delicious hot chocolate, made with water in the traditional Andean style. Somehow my stomach survived all of this. It sort of came back to bite me a bit later on, but it was still worth it. And the chocolate at that place was absolutely delicious, so no regrets. My last stop in Mindo was a butterfly sanctuary just down the road from the Chocolate Museum. Now, cloud forests are prime habitats for butterflies because of all the greenery and the moisture, so this is absolutely one of the key things to see and do when you're in Mindo. You can get out into the forests in the mountains around the town of Mindo, but if you're stuck for time, like I was, then you can see them at this sanctuary in the town center. The sanctuary seemed fairly ramshackle, or maybe just a very low-key and homemade kind of thing. When you walk in, you see all the caterpillars and cocoons, where they're in the process of growing and transforming. Then you see some of them beginning to hatch, including a few gigantic ones that honestly looked kind of creepy. And then you enter the main butterfly enclosure, and they are everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. Black, blue, red, yellow, white, and orange. Some were tiny and delicate, others were huge. And they really were beautiful. Just outside of the butterfly enclosure, but still within the grounds of the sanctuary, was a small deck area where they had set up sugary feeders to attract hummingbirds. For me, this was really special because it was the first time I'd ever seen a hummingbird in real life. They moved so fast, they almost didn't seem real, hovering in mid-air with this blur of wings and darting around from side to side, up and down. And then it was time to move on from Mindo. There are lots of things to see and do in the cloud forests around Mindo, such as hiking, nature trails, ziplining, and the like. However, I had decided that up until that point I was just in survival mode. I was happy to have made it as far as I did, the way that I was feeling, and my aim at that point was to get out of Ecuador in one piece. So I headed towards the Mindo bus station and then started making my way back to Quito. On the way back to Quito, our bus was stopped and searched by a local group of commandos. They were patrolling for drug trafficking and narco trafficking in this part of the world. It is a major issue in Ecuador and in this part of the world generally, but especially in Ecuador at the moment. And you would know about that if you saw my previous vlog where I traveled through Guayaquil. So this is sort of just one of those things that comes with the territory. I got back to Terminal La Filia in Quito and then jumped in an Uber out towards Quito Airport, where I stayed in an Airbnb in the small nearby village of Tababela for my last night in South America. I was staying at the apartment of a family who lived nearby. Arriving in Tababela, the Uber driver wasn't able to find the apartment. It was kind of weirdly located, but eventually we found it. The Airbnb there was an apartment that was owned by a lovely family who lived nearby, and the moment that they met me, they could tell that I wasn't 100%. So the mother of the family very kindly offered to go out and get some supplies for me. So that was some salty plain crackers, some bread, a basic noodle, like instant noodle dish, and of course bottled water. And that was it. That was my last night in Ecuador and my last night in South America. And when I look back on it all, it was just a dream. All of it. The Andes, the Amazon, the salt flats in Bolivia, Rio de Janeiro, Patagonia, the deserts of Peru, and the Galapagos Islands. The chaos, the beauty, the friendships, and the exhaustion. It's hard to process it all, to be honest. What an incredible continent and what an amazing journey so far. Stay with me though, because there is more coming up, because this is not South America Diaries, this is Latin America Diaries, and I will be going towards Central America in my next video, but first it is time to wrap up my time in Ecuador. Rapid fire round for the country of Ecuador, the country that I loved, but I don't think it really loved me back, unfortunately. Getting sick in Cuenca, credit card issues, the relapse of the illness. Ecuador was the country where my trip really started to come undone, unfortunately. However, it was nice for what I was able to enjoy it for. So let's begin. Favorite city in Ecuador? That would have to be Quito. I think Cuenca was probably a bit lovelier than Quito, but as you would have seen in my previous vlog, in Cuenca I was certainly in no state to enjoy the city, so I would say Quito was my favorite city in Ecuador. Going and experiencing the equator was awesome. Favorite region, that would have to be the Galapagos Islands. If I had to pick one region, I mean, I didn't really do regions when I was in Ecuador, but the one region that I really spent time in was the Galapagos Islands, and that was just mind-blowing. Like being out there on this remote archipelago in the middle of the Pacific, surrounded by these prehistoric looking animals, just cool. Best food, Ecuadorian chocolate, no doubt. That cake that I had at the República del Cacao in Quito, the chocolate with dulce de leche layers through it, that might have been one of the best cakes that I have ever had in my life, even if my stomach didn't agree with it. And best experience, again, like wandering around the Galapagos Islands and just walking down the street and having a gigantic tortoise just wander out in front of me. I mean, stuff like that is once in a lifetime. And I would say an honorable mention to having butterflies landing on me and sort of having like that close connection with the butterflies when I was in Mindo. It's sort of a bit surreal as well. Next time on Latin America Diaries, I will be beginning a brand new chapter of my journey and the final leg of my trip around Latin America. We will be leaving South America and heading to Central America. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you then.